Hello and welcome to the official Celtic FC Podcast and to another episode of From the Archives. On this episode we're going to hear an archive interview with the one and only Tommy Burns, a Celtic legend in every sense. Tommy made over 500 appearances for the club between 1975 and 1989, picking up 11 honours along the way, but as well as being a truly brilliant player, Tommy is well remembered as being a real icon in the hoops because he represented the supporters on the pitch. And in actual fact, in this interview, you'll hear him use his famous line that he was a supporter who was lucky enough to play for the club. Tommy, of course, also spent time as Celtic manager and as part of the coaching staff here at Celtic Park before his sad passing in 2008. But in this interview, Tommy speaks exclusively about his playing days at Celtic, covering subjects like how he signed for the club, his playing days overall, his favourite European matches that he played in, working with the great Jock Stein, and of course what Celtic means to him. There's a few things to note before I press play and let you hear the interview. Firstly, the interviewer's questions were never meant to be heard in this piece, so he wasn't mic'd up, which is why he maybe sounds a bit quiet at points, but I've kept the questions in because it was a really natural and interesting conversation about the club that we all love. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that this interview is from the early to mid-2000s, which is worthwhile remembering because at points Tommy maybe references recent matches and so on. We hope you'll enjoy this brilliant archive interview then with the late, great Tommy Burns.
Tommy, when you were playing for Celtic, Billy McNeil once described you as the jewel in Celtic's crown. How did that make you feel?
I wish I'd remember that, John. That's the first I've heard of that. Usually it's some other names for me. They weren't as quite complimentary, but no, I think there was a spell in my career where I actually got to a very good level. I think, if I'm being perfectly honest, too short a spell really. When you look back on your career and you dissect it, and you can look at it from a coach's perspective, and you can look at it from a manager's perspective, and you can really look at the things in the game that were missing for a player, and hopefully those things that I've learned I can help with the younger players now. But I think there was a 2 or 3 year spell where I got to a really high level here, and for whatever reason I never really sustained it consistently. But I think that's something that happened. I think that's part of my character, and it's something that you basically just learn from.
Is that not a part of the professional character anyway, that you're always setting the bar a bit higher for yourself, you're always pushing yourself and never being satisfied with levels of performance?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that especially at a club like this, because there's an unbelievable amount of pressure on you to play here, and I think that was double when you're a guy that supported the club and came through the jungle and the Celtic end and supported the team and all these different things, and then coming onto the ground staff as a youngster and having these aspirations about what you wanted to be. You wanted to be a Celtic player, and you wanted to be a first team player, you wanted to be winning things, you wanted to stay a long time, then to have a testimonial. So all the things that I was after, I managed to achieve, but without a lot of worrying times and nights here, no losing sleep, but you wake in the middle of the night, you'd be worried about the team playing well or big games coming up, and so there's a real anxiety there. But I think in a funny sort of way that helps you to be successful, because it's being aware of what it means to other people, what it means to people that turn up every week and support the team, and the money they spend and what they expect. And I think when the chips are down, that's something that away in the back of your mind is something that drives you on, and then it keeps pushing you every day. But it never changes. It never changes here. It's just something that drives you, and you either have to be there and be driven, or you just fall by the wayside and somebody else comes in, takes your place.
What is Celtic, is it the institution, mean to Tommy Burns?
I think just basically the same as what it means to every other supporter, John. I mean, I think you're part of it. I think you're always aware of whenever you go that you represent the club. There's always people watching you. I think I recognised that and learned that from a very young age. That there's always people prepared to say things about you if you're up to no good. And it's a question of representing the family that brought you up, and bearing in mind that My father was a big, Celtic supporter, although he didn't go to a lot of games. He was a real supporter of the club. And then getting the chance to play and sign for the club, I think you're always aware of, you don't want to let your family down, and I think it's an extended family, really. But I think it all comes together when the Celtic support come together here for games, and I think the European nights are perfect examples of that. I think Seville was an unbelievable example of that, where you had guys from all over the world all just coming together for this. I think I've described it before as a cause. Once they come together, there's never any trouble or anything like that. They just want to support Celtic and give the right signals to people that what the club's all about, And it's not been any different from me. I don't think I've ever looked on myself as anything other than a supporter who was lucky enough to get to play for Celtic.
You're talking about your family there. Within the family, when you signed for Celtic and when you started to make your way through the first team of the reserves, then the first team, and so on and so forth, how significant was it in the family? Was it a huge thing for your family?
Well, I think going back to the time when I signed for Celtic, I think I'd come in, and at that time I had 2 or 3 offers to go to England, not to sign, but just to go for trials, and I think I had that in my mind, because Celtic at that time were one of the top clubs in Europe, and I think I had that in my mind then that I don't think it would happen for me there, because such a high profile there and so many great players, and not really thinking that as the years were going by that team was coming to an end. So I came in and said that I was going to go to, I think it was Leeds United in trial, who were also a big club at that time. Everton, I think, wanted us to go there, and I was actually leaving. And when then John Higgins, then God rest him, said to me, have a wee look in there at the trophy room. So I went in with my dad and John Rice, who was a great friend of mine at that time, and had helped me fantastically as a youngster. And then looked at the trophies, and my father, who didn't have a great influence on me as a boy at football, because I was away working and everything like that. But he said to me, it's the Celtic you're turning down here. You need to really think about that. So a couple of minutes looking around at the trophies and thinking, Craig, how good would that be to go and tell your pals that you signed for Celtic, and everything like that. So very quickly changed my mind. So that was probably the best advice Mall Man, God rest him, ever gave me, and I'll always be eternally grateful for him, even just for that one bit of advice, because it changed my whole life,
Julie, obviously, I think Tony wants to speak to you later about your time in management here, but in terms of your playing career, what would you say was the highlight, or is there something that stands out as being the highlight of your playing career?
I think the highlight for me was to be here such a long time. I mean, as I say, a lot of that time was spent worrying, and I know that there was a lot of players at the time that cared deeply about the game, and they cared deeply about their reputation in the game and how they were going to be remembered here. And I was lucky enough that I was surrounded with loads of players like that. McGrain was the best ever for me here. Kenny Dalglish was here certainly as a young player coming into the team. Kenny was just leaving at that time, but was certainly a huge influence. Bobby Lennox, fantastic professionals. And then had the guys that I played a long time with. Davy Provan was a fantastic professional. Murdo MacLeod, Roy Aitken, who was a fantastic player here. And then Paul McStay and Frank McGarvey, George McCluskey, guys that were here a long time, and had a real pride about playing for Celtic and wanting to be remembered as guys that had won something. They didn't want to be remembered as a Celtic team that had went for 2 or 3 years without being successful. You always had to be thinking, what did we win? And I think that over the piece, I think we won a hell of a lot of trophies. And I think the big problem we had, not so much the problem, but one of the big obstacles we faced, that we were like a second generation after the Lisbon lines. And so it was all the things that they had won, people were still expecting that to happen, is what happens in football. But I think over the piece, if you look back at the 10 years or so that all that group of players were together, I think you would find that they were fantastically successful, and I think they can all look back on their careers here with great pride.
Any Jock Stein reminiscences or observations even? I mean, obviously you were here when he was still here. He brought you into the Celtic team.
Well, I think he was like, by the time I came in here, he was like a god here. I mean, I think he'd won everything. He'd won the European Cup and had taken Celtic to a total, different world. And that being the case, he was just a guy that, whatever he said, you done. And I think the outstanding memory for me, apart from the great things that they done, with the team and everything. We went one time as a very young player coming in, and basically Big Jock he was old school, and if he thought for 1 second that you were ever stepping out of line, then he would just nail you to the wall, And I can remember 17 years old, first year in as a sort of full-time player, and we're going to Hamilton Accies to play a sort of Celtic 11. They used to play a lot of those types of games then, pre-season, Celtic 11 against Hamilton Accies. And at that time there'd been a few players that sort of were coming towards the end of their careers here, guys like Tommy Callaghan, Harry Hood, Dixie Deans. So they were in the squad to go and play, and they would also make that with some reserve players and obviously some very young players, and I fell into the very young category. But at that time, didn't have a coat, worth talking about, so it was just like a jacket. As I say, I was only 17, and came in for the game, and Big Jock quickly observed that didn't have any coat on, so he's thinking to himself, he must think he's playing, no coat on to be sitting in the stand, which was the furthest thing from my mind, John, But anyway, I say to him, hey sir, where's your coat? And I was like, I've not got a coat. So just at that, John Clark walked by. John was taking the team that night, although Big Jock was going to the game. Hey Clarky, give me that team line. So I realised after it what he was doing was he was putting me in the team. I thought at the time when I looked, I thought, I wonder what's happening there, but right, belong. So obviously I was in the team, so we get to Hamilton. I'm amazed because there's about half a dozen first team players in it, and I'm suddenly thrown into play, and I thought, crikey, fantastic, Anyway, 5 minutes into the game, we got the ball a couple of times and tried a couple of wee flicks and everything like that, which absolutely drove Big Jock mental. It drives me mental now, actually. But anyway, a couple of things. So next thing I hear is a shout, hey you, hey sir! And that was a Big Jock shout, and I was like, I'm down the side thinking, crikey, he was right down the front side of the stand, right on the touchline at Hamilton, the old Hamilton. I gave a wee flick again, like, hey you! I looked across, he was like, hey, you've got 5 minutes to get something done or else you're getting off. So we're only 10 minutes into the game, so this is me, my first game, 10 minutes into it, Jock Stein gave me this absolute lambasting. Anyway, lasted to half time, and go at half time, was like, hey, away you going to the bath. Away you going to the bath. You're playing like an effing old man. So that was me. And totally distraught, away him and I say, hey, that's me, I'm not making it Celtic. And what is it? Big Jock said to me, right? I was like, oh, bloody got him, see that Jock Stein, So, but anyway, following day, I think it's old psychology, he works it towards a positive. He goes, come here you, hey, what have I told you about that? And next thing, 5 minutes with you, and the next thing you're walking away and you feel as if you're the best player in the world again. And he was fantastic at that. He'd done that later on when I became a first team player as well. He would take you and just absolutely floor you, and then 2 minutes later he would have you back. And to be fair, Big Billy had some of those traits as well, could take you and nail you, but at the same time had a fantastic way of motivating you as well. So, and obviously from the football point of view, we went to Australia again as a very young player, 20 years old. We went over to Australia. Kenny had just left, 76 it was. We all went over to Australia to play in a sort of pre-season tournament. Where Celtic played with Arsenal, who were full then of Malcolm McDonald, Alan Hudson, Frank Stapleton, Liam Brady, all those guys. Great Arsenal team, or great players at that time they had. Singapore national team, in Red Star Belgrade, and Australia international team. So we played a kind of round robin thing. Semi-final we played Red Star in Singapore. They beat us 3-0, absolutely murdered us 3-0. And so to go to Australia, for Singapore to Australia, and we met them up again to play there against the Australian international team in Arsenal again. We beat Arsenal, we beat the Australian international team, which were great results then for us because we were sort of a team that was just sort of put together then. And then we came to the Red Star again. And that's the first, what you would think would be any kind of tactical input that Big Jock had, and said to us, listen, that game in Singapore, we're chasing here, we're chasing there, look, just leave them with the ball, come back into our own half, just stay nice and compact, nice and tight, and if they try to play through us, then we can steal it. And if they lose their patience and try to play through us, we can steal it, and then we can go and hit them. We drew 1-1 with them that night, and we played really, really well. Just left them with it, and could see them all getting really angry because there was no way through, whereas in the first game we were charging at them, we were just playing around about it. And then we went into the final, we played them in the big final. Exact same thing again, leave them with it, drop off, stay nice and tight, beat them 2-0. And it was remarkable. I've always had that in my mind ever since then. That was the sort of the guy who just looked at a game where a team got absolutely murdered and thought, look, we don't need to do that, just come off them, leave them with it. And I know he was absolutely chuffed to bits when we won that tournament, because really we didn't have any right to win that tournament.
Without Kenny as well.
Exactly. Plus we got a few quid for it as well, which is into the Swiss bank account, John. Into the Swiss offshore.
Old Firm games, any...
Any Old Firm game. Didn't make any difference, John.
Anyone that just comes to mind?
No, but I think that none come to mind. But I think that when you look back, we can look back that group of players that I had the pleasure of playing with, and we had 10 years here of never losing an Old Firm game. I think from 79 till 89 at Celtic Park, we never lost an Old Firm game in those 10 years, and we won a hell of a lot of Ibrox as well. So with a fantastic record, but that group of players had a real fantastic focus. You know, when the curtain went back and the crowd were here, and we knew what it was about, it was Rangers, and you know, you got to go and do your stuff. Even if you don't play well, you still got to go and do the other things in the game. Like, you got to go and compete and get in about them and let them know it's Celtic they're playing. And we had fantastic success here. We really did. As I say, to play for 10 years, Old Firm games at Celtic Park, never lose one. Was keeps you warm in the cold nights, John, you know.
I've seen your reaction when you scored against Rangers, but what's actually going on in your head when you score?
Well, I think if you could go to a guy sitting up behind the Celtic end there, or it was a guy in the jungle at that time, you could take him out here and say, right, here you are going, you've scored against Rangers. It would go absolutely mental. And it was always the same. It was always the same. And I think obviously when you scored against Rangers, it gave you a wee bit extra because you knew what it meant to family and your pals and all that type of stuff. But any time I managed to get a goal, didn't get as many as I probably should have as a player, but even scoring in the reserve game here gave me a fantastic buzz, because it's a goal, it's history, it's your name down in the goal scoring charts and at that time in Celtic's history, so it's all good, all good.
If you were asked, put in the spot, you were talking about the guys you played with, and you know, some fantastic names there, but if you were put in the spot and asked who was the best player of your generation?
McGrain, always. Never changed from then. I don't think it'll ever change, because I seen him obviously when I was a young player, just maybe 5 years younger than Danny, but coming in and about the team, seeing the battle he had to establish himself with the injuries he had, the fractured skull he had, which nearly finished him. The foot injury he was out for over a year with here. And to come back, and he was a phenomenal footballer, a real driven man. Danny, as a player, was totally driven. He would come in and the training would be the exact same to him. And I think we certainly I took a lot of that training was the same. And if you trained at a real high intensity and had a real competitive edge in the training, then it would automatically go into a Saturday, into games. And he had a mentality about him which I've never seen anybody else have. And he would dominate games here from the right back position. And I remember as a sub one night, and Big Jock sitting thinking, crikey, Danny's like a bloody magnet to that ball. And that's exactly what he was like. He was like a magnet to the ball. And he took that to international level where he was fantastic. And then he had the bad injury that kept him out for about 14-15 months, and come back and had to adapt his game because he didn't have the same pace to get up and down then, and he was obviously a bit older as well. But just changed his game and adapted, and became a much more composed player. But just an absolute, and the level of consistency was beyond belief. It really was. He was remarkable, and he has always been the best for me, always.
If you cast the net wider to people who perhaps are out with your generation, who would be the best Celtic player you've ever seen?
Well, I think Larsson would have to be the one when you consider the impact he made and the amount of goals he scored. I think one of the great things that all Celtic people like to do is reminisce and look back on great players and times we'd like to have seen somebody like Charlie Tully or Patsy Gallagher or the great Jimmy McGrory. And probably in Henrik Larsson we've seen what probably Jimmy McGrory was like in the 20s. A guy that, I mean, he had an even better goal scoring record than Larsson, which was frightening. I know you might say it's the Scottish Premier League, but it didn't matter. I mean, his goals were fantastic, all types of goals. The running off the ball, the understanding of the game, and even in the big European nights he was fantastic, even against the top teams. So I think I would have to say he would have been the best I've seen, undoubtedly.
Right, the only other thing I was going to ask you was outstanding European night as a player here at Celtic Park.
Well, I think the outstanding European night that I was involved in here was, I think the night we played Sporting Lisbon, and we'd lost 2-0 to Sporting Lisbon, who were a decent side, probably a lot of everything else. They were much better in their own ground, and they'd beaten us 2-0 in the UEFA Cup or the European Cup. I think it was the UEFA Cup actually, and they'd beaten us 2-0 in Lisbon, and it could have been 3 or 4. They really gave us a real going over then. And coming back into the game here, we'd obviously took everything else when Celtic. If you lose and losing in a manner like that, we'd get heavily criticised, and people were calling us the Lisbon Lambs and all this type of stuff. So it was really getting right in your nerves, So we had to come into the next game, and we beat them 5-0 that night. And I don't care who it would have been. I think if we'd played any team in the world that night, because every single Celtic player on the night had actually peaked. And I think there's very few games in my whole career I can ever remember so many players actually being right on the button for a specific occasion. But that night we were absolutely fantastic, and I think we were 3-0 up in 15 minutes, and just we ended up winning 5-0. It could have been 10, and Proven in the wing was incredible. McGarvey ran them ragged. Murdo McLeod in the middle of the park, Danny coming up for the right back position. Brian McClare had a fantastic game, and I think I managed to get a goal after about 7 minutes. And the crowd, I think we did about 57,000 that night in the old Celtic Park, and the noise was absolutely bedlam. And I can remember coming off at the end of the game, the whole place was in an uproar, because it was a fantastic night, and one that I think a lot of people still remember even to this day. So I think that was the outstanding. We had a lot of good nights where we won games. We beat Juventus here 1-0. I remember going to I think it was Kent in Belgium, beating them 4-0 over there. They weren't a bad side. We beat them 4-0 there. So we'd good games, and there were some games against German teams that we'd done well and everything like that. But if you're talking about for a really one that stuck out in the mind that night, was just everything that you want to be involved in a good Celtic European night,
You were just talking about the old Celtic Park there. We talked to Bertie yesterday, and he said that he preferred the old Celtic Park to the new Celtic Park, just for atmosphere. If you were put in the spot, new Celtic Park, old Celtic Park, what would you pick?
Well, I think that was our time, John. I think that was our time, and we understood that where the real hardcore were in the jungle at the far end there, and I always loved playing in front of the jungle. It was never too fussy playing this side in front of the main stand, and all my better stuff seemed to be down the side of the jungle. But I think European nights, the atmosphere was really, really special then. It really was. But I have to say, in the new stadium, when the European nights, I mean, I've looked back over the last few years at Juventus and Valencia and nights like that, the atmosphere's been absolutely fantastic. But I think Bertie's been a wee bit maybe melancholy, because that's the one that he loved and understood, and I would probably agree with him to a certain extent, because that was our Celtic Park. But I wouldn't mind a wee shot at playing in front of this crowd on a European night, that's for sure.